Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wiley sponsored panel on the differences between distance and online learning. I'm your moderator, Suren NAIDOO. I am the General Manager of Wiley Education Services International Group. And today I have two folks with me. I'll start with our host, David ROWSON. David is the Director of Academic Services at Wiley Education Services based in the UK, where he manages a team of learning designers, learning technologists, and student support coordinators. So David's team is responsible for designing and supporting our online courses for Wiley's partner universities across the UK, Europe, Middle East, and Australia. David has worked in online learning for over 12 years as a learning designer, online learning director, and having previously worked as a teacher and teacher trainer. Our guest today is Adam Matthews. Adam is lecturer in technology and learning environments at the University of Birmingham in the UK and the lead academic on a new postgraduate program called Design for Learning Environments. So probably the most appropriate course to demonstrate some of the topics that we want to cover today. The University of Birmingham is partners with Wiley Education Services on this new program, which is set to launch in June. Adam's research interests cover the relationship between education and technology. And with that, I'm going to hand over to the host, David ROWSON. David?
Thanks, Suren. I will now start my presentation. So I'm going to start just by showing you a picture of myself and Adam. We're not new to EURIE. We were here last year and did a presentation and a talk with our colleague Mark Davis at the conference in Istanbul in 2020. So great to be here again at EURIE. Just going to start with a few comments about Wiley. So in case you don't know who we are, Wiley focus on research and education, as you can see from this slide. We support researchers globally by collaborating with authors, societies, and libraries. And on the right-hand side, on the higher education side, we publish a large range of professional development books and courseware. And in my part of the organisation, Education Services, we partner with universities to help them to put their degree programmes online through marketing, through recruitment, through student support and technical support, but mainly through course development, which is something that we're obviously going to be talking about today. And just that Wiley Education Services company in numbers, you can see that we've got more than 60 partners. It's probably nearer 70 now. We're in Australia, the US, which is our home, and in the UK. And you can see the number of graduates, courses, and programs that we run in partnership with universities like Birmingham. In academic services, which is where I work, we help our university partners design and develop online courses, which we hope are highly engaging learning experiences for their students. I mean, with three areas that we really focus on. So distinctiveness of bringing out the brand and the mission and value of the partner we're working with. Outcomes oriented, so our courses are really directed at exactly what the students need to get from the courses, and high engagement. And I think a lot of what we talk about in this session today will be how to engage students online and how to build really interesting learning experiences for them. And also, I guess, why that's important. So what makes a good online course? I thought it was good to start with the student context. I think we focus a lot on pedagogy, we focus a lot on content, but we can, if we're not careful, forget the student. So just thinking about the context of the student, we're all very familiar with that picture on the top of students in campus lecture rooms. It hasn't changed very much since when I studied at university, but we're probably less sure of the context at the bottom, which is the online student, often international, around the world somewhere, studying in a very different kind of environment. And if you think about the top picture, the student there, the context of the student there is quite a passive, in most cases, quite a passive context. It's listening or watching a lecture, but it has also great affordances. So students can talk to each other, they can talk to the teacher if they're not really clear about what's going on, they can ask questions. And I think crucially also, the lecturer or teacher can see if the students are lost or bored just by looking at their eyes. In the bottom picture, it's not the same, and there's a lot of consideration that we have to give to make that course engaging, to keep the students' attention, and also to compensate for the fact perhaps that the peers and teacher are not so available to that student. So moving on, if a good course contains both interaction with peers and teacher as well as interaction with content, how is that achieved online and asynchronously? We can present the teacher, of course, through live sessions or through pre-recorded video, but we can also do so by the voice that we convey in the instructional text and through clearly focused learning materials. Activities to enable peer interaction include online discussions, group work, peer review exercises, and cognitive presence, of course, is evidenced through reports, quizzes, reflective journals, and e-portfolios. So there are ways online to make sure that the teaching presence and the teaching voice comes through, and also that the students interact with their peers and with their teacher. Finally, a very important distinctive element of a good online course is the purposeful use of media. So this is there to bring the content to life. And here you can see different examples of media that might be incorporated in the course, from video to animation, to branching scenarios, to light board presentations. There are different kinds of media that students will come to expect to see in their online course. So I wanted to say a few words about the development process, because it's a bit more involved, perhaps a bit more complicated, involves more people than in a traditional campus-based course. So here you can see the large team that works alongside the author, the academic who's authoring the course. Of course, there's the learning designer, but you can see they're backed up by learning technologists, by people to produce video, to produce graphics, animators, proofreaders who proof the content, rather like when you publish a book, to make sure that everything is correct and no typos. And the module authors backed up by course leaders, by TEL teams, technology enhanced learning teams within universities and other academics. So I think the one thing that's really distinctive straight away is the large group of people that's actually involved in the course development. And that development process for a course can take up to 6 months. It's worth knowing that upfront. It's actually a lengthy period to actually design and develop the course. We go through planning stages, design stages, build stages when the content is built into the VLE, testing stages, and then delivery. The good news, of course, is that once it's been designed, then for subsequent releases to different cohorts of students, it's a much quicker and easier process to update and release the new course. So I'm just going to finish before I kind of pass over to Adam, just by looking at one of those processes, the design process. And you can see here that we build up from identifying different parts of the learning journey. So acquire, research, reflect, discuss, practice, assess. Some of those words you can see immediately are about information transfer and getting an understanding and knowledge. But a lot of those words are about activity. That's a key word that we'll use in the session today, about what you actually want the student to do, whether they reflect, whether they discuss with peers, and whether they practice something before they're assessed. So those kind of key parts of a learning journey are then built up in a weekly planner. So for each week of the course, we will plan the learning journey for the student. And usually that starts by identifying the number of lessons that the student's going to have during that particular week. and putting a learning outcome against each of those lessons. So each lesson has an outcome it's trying to achieve. And then excuse me. And then, so there's your learning outcomes for the week, identified in lessons. We'll then start to add those cards as we build up what that learning journey is going to look like. So for the outcome in lesson 1, what are the appropriate activities that students are going to need to do to evidence that they've actually achieved the outcome. So you can see there are research activities, practice activities, discussion activities going into to try to make that both a varied experience for the student, an interactive experience, but also one that's going to meet the outcomes of each lesson. And then finally, we're putting in the content that's actually the acquires and the researches which are actually going to fuel those activities. So those are notional, conceptual blueprints or designs for courses, but I'm now going to pass on to Adam so he can talk you through an actual course design. So Adam, over to you.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. So we thought it would be really useful taking those processes that David has walked you through to show a design in practice. So we could show you lots of glossy media that we've produced, but that would be the end product. And I think all of that work that goes into getting the end product is really important, and it's the most important part. If that work isn't done at the start, so those discovery elements that David talked about at the start of the design process, you may end up with a more passive course where we're just talking about Zoom calls or online content. So this method that David talked about the card sorting exercise, this is an example of one of the modules that I'm working on at the moment. So I'll talk you through how we did that, and then I'll show you the final build, which is looking like the online course at the moment. And I think the most important thing about the card sorting exercise, as you can see on the screen, it's quite messy. It's quite a messy process. Some of my colleagues that have gone through this process often say it's quite difficult because they're being asked to sort of lay their course out, but that's a really great exercise for them because they're working with that learning designer. So that collaboration that David showed between the learning designer and the author, that's a really important relationship because the learning designer can challenge the author to ask them what they would like in the course. And vice versa. So the author can also challenge the technology team to come up with new ways of delivering online learning. And those cards are important because you can see the different colours. So what we may do if we were to sit down to design an online course, we may produce videos, we may produce reading lists, which are all quite passive experiences for the learner. So if that was the case, we may have lots of cards that are that light blue colour, which are called acquire. So we could instantly see that course doesn't include that much student engagement, but you can see from just glimpsing what you've got on the screen there is that we've got lots of colours, which is good, which means there's lots of different student interactions with the course. So acquire may be reading some journal articles, but once we get into research, practice, reflect, discuss and assess, the students are doing things. So in online learning, we often think a student should be looking at the screen all the time. That is not the case. We want them doing stuff. We want them interacting with content, and those are the interactivities that can be enhanced through the media that David spoke about. So this is the kind of the storyboarding process, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen and I'm just going to show you what this looks like in the University of Birmingham's virtual learning environment, which we're building out at the moment. So if I share my screen, hopefully this should seamlessly go. Okay, so what you can see on screen now is the University of Birmingham's virtual learning environment. This is Canvas. But what we could see on that previous storyboarding screen when we've got all the different learning activities are units broken down. And this particular course is over 8 weeks. So we have 8 units and students will come in, and here you can see the different steps to build up from that unit. So what we will have here is, if we jump into week 1, is a video introducing the week with all the outcomes, but the student can click through and see all of their different activities that they need to do. For example, here we've got a reading list that they should be engaging with for that week. Here we've got some text input around what the what design is in this particular case. We call these explore screens. So we've broken this down into explore and activities. Explore is more that kind of acquisition where we're describing the subject, and then we get into more activities. So if I just take you back to that overall screen, you can see the results of that card sorting exercise. So we have explore, which is more of the acquisition, and then we've got discussions. So we may have key readings, information from the faculty, but then we ask students to discuss that point, and we may conceptualize that into a particular case study, a scenario. And then we've got activities to ask students to do things. So we may ask them to go away and do something. For example, on this course, once we get to Unit 3, we ask the students to write a blog. So really early on, we ask them to submit a piece of work to be assessed. And that's for assessment, but it's also for us to give feedback and for students to start synthesizing some of that content that they've done. It's not a formal academic piece of work, but it's that engagement and doing and engaging with the content. And we do that on a weekly basis then. So here we can see we've got those different weeks broken down. And students will go through that, and this will be supported by weekly webinars. So we have the content which is built, as David said. Once that's built, it's an easier process to share that content, but then it will come alive with teacher present through announcements, through emails, through weekly sessions and personal tutoring. So very different to that lecture hall slide that David showed, but we're kind of guiding students through, but making sure that they do those activities. That was this particular design. There's lots of different ways of doing it. This is just one way, but that relationship with the instructional designer and the author is key to start to develop those different ideas. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay, well, thank you very much, David and Adam. So I've got a few questions from the audience, and so let me see if I can start with my first question here. Adam, why do you call your new course Design for Learning Environments? Is there something? I mean, it seems different from what we've normally done.
Thanks, Suren. Yes, it is really different, and we wanted it to be different, and comes through a lot from my research, but also we wanted it to be much more future facing. So to reiterate, Design for Learning Environments is the title, and we put out a definition from some of the literature, and I'm just going to read the definition out because I think it draws the scope of that definition through. So the design of learning environments is the systematic analysis, planning, development, implementation and evaluation of physical or virtual settings in which learning takes place. So I think we've got to a stage, certainly sort of brought forward by COVID, where the virtual environment and the physical environment are starting to merge. So we wanted our program to be reflective of that. So we want to use design theory, we want to use design practices to be used in learning environments. So for example, we've got a case study on the program where we talk about a brand new building at the University of Birmingham. So we built a brand new teaching laboratory for our science faculty, and that is a learning environment. Equally, we have an online learning environment where we produce online courses, but students who are in that science faculty will take advantage of the big new building, but they will log on to online courses as well. So there's a bringing together of that. Of course, if you're an online student, you will probably only really engage with the online aspects of the university, but you may come to the university campus occasionally. So we really wanted to bring that through. And I think in the future, we are going to see much more of that with developments such as the Internet of Things, where we're not just going to be staring at laptops. We're going to be looking at different elements within the lecture theatres, within campuses, and that's going to develop more. So hopefully we're future-proofing it with a name, but we wanted it to be different as well. And there was lots of discussion, should it be called online education, digital education, instructional design, lots of debates around that, but hopefully we've come out with the right name.
Okay, well, it sounds like it captures everything and makes the modality, so you're agnostic to the modality, whether it's campus, whether you call it distance education, remote learning, online learning, it's really the same philosophy and principle.
Exactly. And as David said, we should be talking about good learning experiences, and regardless of where students are. And universities are global institutions now. So at Birmingham, we want to attract local students, but we also want to attract people from all over the world as well and create that global community. I think there will be some challenges there. So I think it would be great for us to offer a course where we say to students, you can engage with this course however you want. You can engage with it from the US of A, or you can engage with it from around the corner in Birmingham. We're not quite there, but hopefully this program will help with that kind of thinking.
Right. Okay, well, that was very helpful. So if I could shift a little bit to the pedagogy, because I think most of our audience is really trying to understand what that means in the context of these various ways to bring the classroom to the learner. David, how specifically is the online learning approach different from traditional campus approaches, and how is the online student different in that sense?
Okay, well, that's quite a wide question, Suren, but I guess the main difference for me is what's expected of the student, in the sense that campus delivery models they're evolving, but traditionally they've been teacher-led lectures, information transfer. Maybe the students playing a more passive role, listening and kind of reading. Whereas in online, we're focusing much more on a student-centered approach, students taking control of their learning, taking control of when and how they interact with the lesson content, especially if they receive that asynchronously, of course. So a lot of students book online courses because they prefer that flexible modality of being able to study when they want to. So as learning designers, I guess we have to design so that there is plenty of opportunity for students to interact with the content. And by that, I mean it's accompanied by student activity. It's a model where students learn by doing rather than by listening or reading, as I said. So I guess the other thing that we need to think about as learning designers online is that attention span online tends to be a bit shorter. So we can't simply take a lecture that might be an hour in a campus lecture hall and put it up online as 1 hour. You know, we have to think about what is the kernel of that lecture which has got the most relevance and value for the student, and that might be 15 minutes worth of content, which we can then divide perhaps into clips of 3, 4, 5 minutes, so that students can listen to particular clips and then go back and then carry on with the next clip. So that kind of chunking of content, whether it be in the text in the actual HTML itself or video content, I think is really important from online and very, very different to what you expect to get on campus.
Okay.
Whether Adam has more to say on that, being a teacher on campus himself.
Yeah, and I think it's good to reflect. Everyone globally went online, of course, for the last 12 months. And at Birmingham, we did a lot of work over the summer around training other faculty in online learning. I think the big thing that we sort of got across was that we're so used to a structure of the campus dictating what we do. So at Birmingham, we've got a huge clock tower that goes off every hour, and students start moving around the campus. And that dictates our curriculum. We've got a timetable to say we're in a lecture theatre for 2 hours, we're in a seminar room for an hour, and then students are doing independent learning in the library. So we're kind of forced into this way of teaching and learning. During the COVID pandemic, that structure has been removed from us altogether. So we can potentially have 24/7 learning, but that removal of that structure is quite disconcerting, I think, for us as teachers, because we're so used to it. It's kind of it's an automatic process to be getting up, going to your lecture theatre, delivering your lecture and doing that. Taking that structure away is a problem. And I use the word structure quite a lot in these sessions. And I think the structure, we have to apply that structure ourselves, and working with an instructional designer, learning designer, allows you to apply that structure as you go through. So that's really important. I think we can potentially put lots of stuff online, and we can put too much stuff online because it just overwhelms students. We've really got to think about how they achieve their learning outcomes. And often with online, you're taking content away rather than adding it. It's really stripping it back to really, really is what is needed.
You asked, Suren, about the kind of the online student and how they might be different as well. So just thinking about that, I think their context is different. I mean, if they've chosen this modality for study, then they're probably working, or they've got family commitments, and therefore their time poor, really. So I'd really echo what Adam just said about structuring really focused learning, so they can really go straight in, understand what they have to do, focus on content and learning which is relevant exactly to the learning outcomes, what they're trying to achieve, rather than going off a tangent. And not too much content, because, as Adam just said, content tends to overwhelm. I think also they're in a invidious position in a way that they can't. They're learning asynchronously often, so they can't contact the teacher if they don't understand something or they're not sure what to do next, and that can lead to frustration and demotivation if the task isn't clear. We all know that Netflix or very attractive social media sites are only one click away when you're learning by computer. So there has to be really clear scaffolding, really clear signposting of what the student has to do, and so that they can focus all the time they're spending there on the learning itself and not on trying to work out what to do.
And just to reiterate, that team ethos, I think, is really important there, whether you're working with colleagues or instructional designers. They can challenge you to remove some of that content, because as an academic, there's lots of interesting, I think is really interesting stuff, but it's not always relevant for the student. You know, I probably want to get some of my papers into the course but being challenged to say, we don't need that in there, we can really strip that back. So an example of the course we're developing at the moment, I produced a reading list of all the interesting stuff in my area of study, and there's a huge amount of it, but we really stripped it down to 2 readings per week. We said to students, here's the reading list, we've got a whole bunch of stuff you might be interested in, but these are the really important ones. Read these ones each of these weeks, and that will build up your learning journey.
Okay, so we've talked a fair amount about learning design, the student perspective in terms of engagement and what we want to achieve on outcomes. But you both the teachers and have lived in both worlds. What's the role of the teacher in this new online learning paradigm? And I'll throw that out to you, Adam and David.
I think...
yeah, you go first, Adam.
Sorry. I think probably the teacher might be maybe we may be changing the word there a little bit. It's more of that author. So I think you're authoring content as a team of people. So as researchers in our field and experts in our field, it's more around writing those materials. I think I would say it's a lot more similar to publishing. I think David mentioned producing that online course is very similar to writing a book or writing a journal article when you go through that publishing process. And I think that is the difference. And I think it makes our practice better. I was chatting to David yesterday about that process. It's sometimes a little bit disconcerting when we've taught our modules for a long time, when someone comes along and challenges us. It's not a nice place to be. You know, us as teachers, we like to challenge students, but often we're not the ones being challenged. But I think it makes our practice much better if you can have that kind of critical friend alongside you. And as I said, the designer is really good at that, and that they're really good at creating that relationship with you to create an environment that's safe. They're not going to attack your work. They're going to work with you to do that. And just like working with a really good videographer, so if someone's shooting some video with you, they'll really tell you the best way to do it. You know, I can sit and record lots and lots of stuff on my laptop at home, but is it the best way to deliver that? And people will coach me through and talk me through. And I've learned a lot from working with those kind of people. So I would say it's gone from the individual to the team, hopefully, which makes it a much more collaborative process.
I think if we're talking about, so Adam's talked about development there a bit, but if we think about delivery, then for me the teacher is still the most important aspect of the student experience in an online course. We're not talking about creating wonderful content that replaces the teacher. The teacher is still the most important part. But well-designed content frees up teacher time, and it challenges us to think about where does the teacher add the most value in delivery. And traditionally the teacher has been the person in information transfer, and then the student has gone away and done all the kind of making sense of that and trying to apply that outside the classroom. And I think that reverses, or it can reverse, so that the student can consume the content. That's a word that's often used. Consume the content online through lecture, or through reading or watching video or whatever. They can they can be asked to think about what that content means and what kind of questions it might throw up. How does it conflict with their existing experiences? And maybe those questions then can be brought to a classroom experience and discussed with peers and with the teacher. And I think there you might find that it's a richer learning experience for the student, and the teacher is used more valuably than to just give to do the information transfer bit. And what do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I think that the running of it makes it more real in some instances. So you've got an opportunity to bring in case studies and things that are happening in the world. So my area of research is education and technology. So we have had the best possible case study over the last 12 months. You know, obviously we're not happy the pandemic happened, but in terms of a case study, we've got a huge case study here. So we've got all of that content that is available online, but weekly we can drop messages into the VLE to say this is stuff that's happening in the world, so this is the way people are reacting, so this university has taken this approach. So we can really take that case study, and I think that can happen in lots of different areas as well. You can keep it live, but you've got that content all created, so it gives you that opportunity to do that. You may, in a more traditional sense, you may be kind of just producing lectures as you go, having the content there and then just crystallizing that into case studies and things that are happening. It really helps the students, I think, to bring some of that stuff to life.
Right. Okay. Well, just kind of pulling on that thread a little bit as a teacher, what's the right blend of synchronous and asynchronous self-study that should happen in the classroom? Adam, can we start with you?
Sure. I think it's a really good question, and it's a really fine balance. And I think sometimes we need to look at the audience sometimes. So people in design would do an analysis of their audience, if you like. So I think you need to look at the students. So whether they're undergraduate, postgraduate, part-time, full-time, I think it's really important. I think undergraduate students, certainly first-year undergraduate students, I think need a lot more support. So we may see more synchronous sessions. But I'm a great believer in the synchronous sessions should be fairly informal, and that's the way I've designed the program that we're working on at the moment. I don't prepare any material. We turn up and we talk about the synchronous, the asynchronous content, and we contextualize that and talk that through. So we can create all of this great content, but then making it live. That's, as David said, we can really maximize that in the synchronous content, and that shouldn't be a lecture. For me personally, I don't think we should all turn up at a certain time and see me flick through 50 slides. We can record that and people can watch that at any time. It's the conversations that are important. And a lot of the stuff that we've been doing, we have made them conversations. And I think just like the presentation that we're doing today, I think it's much more interesting to have a conversation, to spark off ideas, than me to kind of just didactically talk at people. So that's the balance. But I think it's a really important question to ask when you're developing the content. It's to say, well, let's put a live session in here where it will work. And I think doing things purposely is really important, and making those decisions. But there's also lots of guidance out there as well, which is really good.
David?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking my experience is mainly with postgraduate students, so it's interesting that Adam made a distinction there between undergraduate and postgraduate. But my experience was with postgraduate, and a lot of students like synchronous sessions. They particularly if it's a totally online course rather than a blended course, they want the opportunity to see their peers, to talk to classmates, and more importantly, receive instantaneous feedback from the teacher. And I think on online courses which are carefully designed, that looking for opportunities for students to get feedback is crucially important. So those synchronous sessions are often really good devices for that. I think also though if you remember that students have signed up to this modality perhaps because they want the flexibility of online, then making those sessions mandatory is probably not a great idea. It may put off some students. So I think having optional sessions where students can join, get feedback, talk to peers, where you're going to post the recording afterwards to the VLE so students can watch it, is the best way to go. But certainly, I think synchronous sessions definitely add value to a course.
There are some logistics to that as well. So talking sort of in terms of developing and building the courses, there's of course faculty questions around when they should be run. So we can't be asking faculty to work sort of crazy hours when we're looking at a global audience. So I think there's those kind of considerations, but also for the student, you know, we may say we have got a synchronous session at 2 o'clock on a Sunday. Who's to say that everybody can make that? So I think there's potentially a blend as well. So we can use discussion forums quite well, but we could say you've got a 24-hour period to pose questions, have discussions, so then it kind of stretches that out over a longer period of time into different time zones. So I think there's a bit of a blend there, but ideally as well, asking students when they would like these sessions to be. Now that's easier when you've got small cohorts. If you're getting into big cohorts, that's really difficult. So I think there's definitely that balance of doing that. And yeah, that's something to be negotiated with the student, but also the faculty as well.
Right. Okay. If I could switch gears a little bit. So a topic that has come up very frequently in the last year, more so than in the last 10 years of being in the business, is the question of assessment. So with the shift to remote learning, one of the very first questions we always get is, how do you do assessments, right? So what are the assessment strategies that are effective for an online design? Adam, could we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Personally, I've not advocated exams, closed book exams, for quite a long time, regardless of on campus and off campus. I think we're in a stage now where we shouldn't be locking people in a room, taking all kind of technology away from them and their books, because in a real authentic environment, in work or home life, we've got access to technology. You know, if I want to change a light bulb at home, I'll be looking at that on YouTube. That's how I learn how to do that. So I don't think we should be doing that. And I think that filters through to online, that kind of authentic assessment. So there's quite a big literature base around authentic assessment. The assessment strategy I've got for the Design for Learning Environments program at Birmingham is that it should be a very personal exercise. So I mentioned the blog that we ask students to do, and we ask students to look at their own context, whether that be their own educational experience or their role that they're working in currently, and to apply some of those methods. So we don't have an issue there where someone can't go off to an essay mill and ask them to produce that essay mill, because they're contextualizing that to their own practice. Now that's particularly specific for a postgraduate course where people are working and have a little bit more experience. But certainly doing that kind of thing, people creating presentations, so we can ask people to create presentations. And I think it's a good assessment strategy in terms of stopping plagiarism, but it's also, we're creating extra skills on top. So we're providing students with the ability to present. So when they get into the workplace, that's a really important skill, to present their own ideas, contextualize literature and research into a particular problem. So I think online gives us certain challenges, but it also gives us opportunities to think about assessment across the organisation, and certainly has over the last 12 months. David, good to get your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I'm surprised you have to go on YouTube to work out how to change a light bulb, Adam. But
I'm not very practical. I'm an academic.
But I get the point you're making about authenticity of assessment. I think that's really important. The only thing I would add to what you just said, I think, was that we find our partners look for kind of reflective assignment activities, which are built up over time. So it's not just one, it's a series of reflections which, where the student is reflecting on their personal experience, their personal context, work experience perhaps. And so, you know, from a plagiarism point of view, we can see that it's absolutely down to that particular student who's talking about that. Yeah, that kind of blend of formative and summative assessment, I think, is an interesting mix as well. So having a number of formative assessments, maybe participation in discussions as well is a popular one that people use. I think online has challenged traditional views of what assessment should be.
And it's almost frightening when you think about online learning design influencing what we've been doing for literally hundreds of years with high stakes final exams, right? So it's starting to become a lot, the design thinking has become a lot more relevant on campus thinking. Would that be a good way to put it? All right. Okay.
Yeah, I think just going back to your comment on high stakes final exams, I think there's lots of research, isn't there, that cramming for final exams is a poor technique for transferring learning from short to long-term memory or encouraging deep learning. It's not effective for that. So constructing meaning with peers is much more effective. The process of active discussion, articulating concepts in your own words, that's much more powerful and evidential of learning, I think, than any kind of final stakes exam where 2 weeks later you've probably forgotten all the things that you knew at that time.
Yeah, I think what we can provide to students is they're taking artifacts away with them, so they can create things that are assessed, but they take that to an employer to say this is what I've done. And I suppose, you know, we need to tackle that students pay a lot of money for a lot of the courses that we offer, and I think having feedback from an expert in their field, an academic expert in their field, if you're feeding back on a student's work, that's really valuable. I think a lot of the online content that we can access is one thing, but that kind of personal feedback for how they can improve and keep that feedback and kind of build on it is really important. So if I was to say where would you kind of focus a lot of work in terms of the running of a course once they've been built, I would say try and get it into as much feedback, direct feedback to students as possible on their assessments, but well-designed assessments as well.
Right. Okay. And actually, so outside of the academic issue, I mean, I can see how this addresses a lot of the student anxiety issues. I mean, I still get flashbacks to my, final exams in engineering. So if we can avoid it, I think it's a great outcome for students.
Mm.
Okay, so David, so on the process side, how has online learning evolved over the past few years from the early distance learning days?
Mm-hmm. Well, enormously. So I'm just about old enough to remember those great heavy binders of content that you got sent out when you were doing distance learning courses with a UK institution, later CD-ROMs, but it was still a very, very passive experience. You were still, okay, it was kind of replicating the campus model in a way. You were just reading content. I think now technology's moved on enormously. The great affordances that weren't there before for kind of communicative exercises and activities. Things are more visual, there's lots more media, it's become more affordable to create media. There are tools for creating nice graphics without much expertise and certainly not much cost. I think that allows courses to be a bit more personalized. You can feel, or at least a good designer can give you the perception that the course is written for you. It's not a book written for everybody, it's a course written just for you. And they can draw teacher presence, they can weave teacher presence through the course so that you feel that you're being taught by an individual. And it gives you a more active learning experience, I guess, a more active and social learning experience. So and that's just basically the affordances of technology that have allowed us to do that, plus a bit more advances in design thinking. What do you think, Adam?
So Adam and David, we've just got 2 minutes left. Okay. So I don't have any additional questions. So Adam, do you want to follow up on David's final thought there and maybe some concluding thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, I think I agree 100% with David, and I think it's that coming together. And I think we've finally got to a position where the online and offline can probably start to be merged, for campus students to have good digital resources, for distance learning students to have good digital resources as well. I think there's a particular challenges for, I work for a research intensive institution, the University of Birmingham, where we've got active researchers. So the research is there and we draw upon that research in our teaching and learning, but it's how do we bring that to life? People can read that content we've got, but we need to communicate that better. And I think the online experiences that we've spoken about can do that really well. And I think a longer relationship with universities can start to develop as well with students. Students may do their undergraduate degree on campus, but they may want to do a distance learning CPD career professional development course 5 years after. So maybe there's this ongoing lifelong learning relationship with the university, I think, which goes with you throughout your life and your career to develop that. Hand over to you, David.
I think that's a very nice place to end. The lifelong learning and the opportunities that online learning gives you for that, and that relationship with an institution over a period of time is a really nice place, really nice thing to highlight at the end of this. So back to you, Suren.
Okay. Well, certainly a vast amount of information to take in. And so I guess David and Adam, if anybody wants to know more, they can always sign up for Adam's course in June, right?
Absolutely.
Please do. If you Google University of Birmingham Design for Learning Environments, you'll find out more.
Right. Well, really appreciate it. And this is really appreciate the kind of forward-looking aspect of this topic. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And thanks everyone in the audience.
Thanks, Suren. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.